We'd like to talk about our mission trip.
Hey.
Don't hit me up.
I'll buy you
Hit everyone else up.
boba.
I'm busy.
I won't buy you boba.
What?
Sorry.
Freaking. So what was your biggest struggle?
My biggest struggle.
Oh my god.
Biggest fear? I guess it was, I didn't think I was qualified. I thought there was like some sort of like minimum requirement for your faith or your relationship with God or something. But I guess what the biggest thing I learned in response to that was, like, for some weird reason, God wants to use his broken creation to minister to his other broken creation. So just come broken, come lacking, and God will use what you do have for his glory, and he'll equip you for far greater.
Biggest fear of going into missions was that I wasn't gonna get along with my team. My team actually had, literally, out of the 8 team, there were 2 introverts, and every single one of them were so loud and extra. Like, I don't know, during the trainings, like, especially when we had fellowship after the trainings, like, it was so draining. And honestly, like, I didn't know how I was gonna handle that, like, at India for like a whole month with them, but not okay.
I think one of them was actually finances. Just gonna be real, 3,600 is a lot of money, especially for a poor college student who is in debt. And then yeah, I think another big fear was like whether or not I'd have like a really, like a true heart for missions, you know? Like if I was gonna go there just to do things, or if I was gonna go there and really encounter God and really serve with everything I have for his glory and not for my glory.
Biggest fear was being wrecked. People talk about like being wrecked like left and right, and like they say like, oh, God's gonna reveal all these like sins to you. And so I was like low-key scared. I was like, oh, in my mind, like being humbled was like it equaled like suffering. If I'm gonna be humbled at this trip, like I'm gonna have to go through suffering, like whether it be emotional, physical, mental, or whatever. And that's what I feared the most.
What was your biggest struggle on missions?
Okay, my biggest struggles on missions was not my team. It was actually fighting for joy. So I get super tired easily, and one thing my leader said to me before we went was keep your face in check. My face, like, it gets super droopy, and like I get like a super RBF when I'm super tired. I never really wanted to like beforehand, like let's say like our next program for the day was like VBS or like outreach for the villages or whatnot. I was never really excited for them. Like that's why, like, I would say like fighting for joy and like understanding that, you know, this is not about myself, but it's ultimately about, you know, glorifying God and giving him the praise and the glory rather than for me.
The struggle?
Yeah.
It was my fear of people. Yeah, as a people pleaser, I really wanted the approval of my leaders and my teammates, especially like the ones I was close to. Like, I remember like fighting with a teammate over pork, and like it was my pride against hers, and like, but in the end I caved because like I wanted to receive her approval and like look holy. That fake holiness, like, it's real on missions. Like, that struggle helped me to realize how simple I am. And I don't know if you guys remember the mask skit. That was my biggest struggle, like putting on masks. I wanted to be the funny person, you know? Like, I wanted to be the holy person, the pretty person. But none of that worked out because God is sovereign. Like, he showed me how ugly and broken I am. But despite that, like, how much greater Jesus is. Like, through my struggles, I got to witness like the perfectness, is that a word? The
Perfection
of Jesus Christ, and I think that's the highlight of my struggles. Yeah.
Missions.
Biggest struggle, I think, was really maintaining the right heart of serving, even in the midst of physical and spiritual difficulty. I feel like when on missions, like physically, of course, you're going to be really tired because like not much sleep. Like even like the activities that you're doing, the ways you're serving are very physically intense. But also spiritually, like it's kind of easy to lose yourself in what you're doing, rather than really being able to comprehend and really process on why you're doing it. So I think that was one of the biggest thing I struggled with, and something that helped me a lot during that is journaling. I kept a journal every single day, come on, and I think that really just enabled me to process the mission trip during the trip and also after I came back.
Mm.
Biggest thing I learned, I would say, it's really not that unrealistic. Like, missions isn't like this crazy idea that only like pastor kids and like holy people would, you know. It's like, it's doable. Like, you can do it. Like, I could see myself potentially maybe doing it.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing I learned was definitely the sovereignty of God. I think that because I went to Greece, and it's kind of amazing how God used like such a terrible situation like the refugee crisis that's currently going on, ultimately for His glory. Because there's so many refugees who, if this refugee crisis, as terrible as it is, if it didn't happen, they would never hear the gospel, because the gospel is outlawed in those countries. But because they're forced to move, because they're forced to come to Greece, that's where they can actually hear the gospel. And even though there is still persecution, it's like pastors and missionaries, they're able to reach out to the people. And the people have open hearts, and many people are actually coming to Christ because of this opportunity, showing that ultimately, like, God is working even in the midst of evil, even in the midst of human plans. Like, ultimately, He's working all things for His glory.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest thing I learned was prayer. Prayer is so powerful. I think I never realized how important prayer was until I went on India. If you ever go to India, missionary James and Hamanim, they're legit like the most faithful people I've ever met in my life. I remember I asked Hamanim this one question. You know, you guys stayed in India for 20 years. Like, how did you do it? Hamanim like just looked at me. She's like, I wanted to go back to Korea every single day. I was like, what are you saying? Like, no, you don't. You're a freaking wog, you know? And she's like, no, like, every single day I had like this guilt of leaving Korea and leaving my family and coming to this like isolated place with no Christians, no friends, no family members. But I remember she told me this one thing, that like the reason why I stayed every single day was because I prayed every single day. You know, I prayed to God to, you know, grant me the strength to, you know, be obedient to Him, you know, to follow His will, and to just, you know, go out there and just really preach, you know, the good news to, you know, those around her. And I mean, her life speaks for herself, you know. It's amazing to see that there are such faithful people in this world, and that they understand that God is always listening to their prayers, no matter how great the request is, and that He will always answer the prayers.